for everybody here on the YouTube channel, you know that this channel is all about helping you become a more confident, consistent musician. That's what I do here at the channel, Christian House Creative Strings channel. And I do it through a lot of different types of videos. Sometimes it's about theory. Sometimes it's about using the ear. Sometimes it's about playing after me. But, becoming a more confident and consistent, happier musician, I think, is not just about having information. Like, hey, what chord change do you play on that song to make it sound hip like that, right? Like, that's information. But that's a lot of times what we think is we need information. Tell me the theory. Tell me the licks. That's part of it. But there's also the tactics, right? There's like the action plan. Like Hamilton, how do you play 13 instruments? Like, how do you practice in a way that allows you to accomplish all that, right? There's an efficiency and all this stuff. That's the tactics, right? That's the action plan. But we don't talk a lot of time about the vision that informs all this. And I think that the mindset and the vision is so important, like to know actually, well, why do you even play music? Like, what are you trying to accomplish, right? It's the mindset. And I think that part of the reason I wanted to bring you on, and for people that don't know Hamilton, I interviewed him from my podcast, for Creative Strings Podcast. You can look for that here on my channel, or you can just look him up, HamiltonHardin.com. He plays 13 instruments, one of my favorite musicians in all time, period. He just plays just about every instrument except for bowed string instruments, which is mostly what I focus on. But regardless of the instruments we play, I think we think about a lot of the same problems as musicians, whether it's composition, practice, performance, whatever it is. But part of the reason I wanted to bring you on today was because I talk a lot about personal development, about how do we actually become more consistent? Because it's not just about information and tactics. A lot of times you can give someone information, like someone says, how do I play faster? You can say, practice like this, but then they don't do it. So why don't they do it? Well, there's fear there. There's a disconnect. There's something going on. It could be pride. It could be laziness. It could be one of a lot of other things, right? And this gets to my point that, like, our journey as musicians, if there's something that's stopping you in your journey as a musician, that's a reflection for you to look at something that's actually stopping you personally. It may not be obvious. The reason I wanted to bring Hamilton on, the reason I wanted to bring you on, is because I think we look at a lot of these things in similar ways, but also different ways. Because, like, for example, I look at things through might say a psychological perspective sometimes, or just from the different books I read. And you look at from your perspective, from maybe the one main book that you read, right? And maybe some other books, right?
Yeah.
Without giving it away. But that's part of why I thought it would be really interesting, because I think there's not necessarily a silver bullet for helping people with wherever they're stuck. And especially because people subscribe to different ideas, and some ideas resonate more with one person than they do with another. So even if we were to talk about our musical vision, I might say my musical vision is about this. Your musical vision, the reason that you play music, might be totally different. So I wanted to ask you, sorry for the long intro, but I'm hoping that we're going to do more of these. And I wanted to ask you some questions about musical struggles and where you see a spiritual lesson in it, and how you would address that. And maybe I would give my take on it, and we see, maybe we agree sometimes, maybe we have different interpretations. Sure. So let's start with this scenario. Have you, or someone another musician, have you ever talked to another musician or yourself been in a situation where you're like, oh, I need to work on this thing musically? Let's say you want to play faster, or you want to figure out some harmonies, or you want to learn some licks, like whatever. And then a year later, you have the same conversation. And you didn't go anywhere with it. So whether it was you or whether it was another musician that you've talked to, and what do you think is at the heart of that? Assuming that they know the answer for how to, actually do the thing. Well, I got to practice this, right? So what is the lesson in that? What's going on with the person? Or for you, what would you see as the lesson in spiritual growth for you?
Yeah, I'll definitely put myself on blast, because it was probably been me more often. I think it's sometimes been lack of focus, and not from the standpoint of not being a focused individual. I think life can present just a lot of things that make it hard to have a singular focus, especially when, for me, I'm a dad, I'm a self-employed musician. And so a lot of times music has become the job aspect of music, like needing to meet deadlines, all that type of stuff. It gets in the way of practice. Um, if I need to, because I'm a single dad, so if I need to make dinner for my kids, uh, that's the time. If we need to spend time together around the table. We need to do some reading. If I need to help with homework, it draws from the focus I would have when I was younger. Now, that's not making excuses. I think as a result of life's scenarios, whatever that may be for you, it requires a more dedicated, disciplined approach to how you look at your time, how you view your time. A lot of times, what I'm realizing now at the age of 40, cutting things out, realizing it's a self-awareness thing. I do not have the capacity to do everything for everybody and be everything for everything. So, like, cutting out, this is not a profitable decision. This is not a great use of time. This is not allowing me to be efficient. And so I need to cut X, Y, and Z out, and let me see how that works. And for me, that's been something that's helped me. By no means do I say I have that mastered, but I am learning to just see on a priority level what's most important, and the things that are low on the totem pole, cutting that out. I think to the point you're making, the spiritual discipline of that. I think you were asking me. That was the question you asked me, right?
No. I mean, I like your answer a lot, but we can also take it to a spirit. We can also say, well, is there like a quote unquote biblical or spiritual,
Yeah.
Correlation to it or not? But let's set that aside for 1 second, because what I hear you saying is basically that, yeah, you find yourself in that situation all the time when you're like, I'm going to accomplish this, and then a year later you're like, I didn't do that, and it's like, but you're kind of owning up to it. Like you're saying that's because I didn't make it a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were other priorities that were more important, my kids, making dinner, stuff like that. And so then at that point, we get to, and I agree with you completely. I feel like I've been in the same position a lot. It's like when I find myself in that situation, I get to be like, I didn't make that a priority. Okay, so is it really a priority or not? Like, do I really want to get this harmonic thing together? Do I really want to be able to play in third position? Do I want to get my smooth vibrato together or not? Or is it just I let all these other things get in the way? But I think that I think just to be able to own that and say, like, prioritizing, having clarity of vision is important if you want to grow, and then owning our stuff, like, and not putting it, because I think a lot of times people can be in a position where they're like, well, I just can't figure it out, or it's my teacher's fault, or it's because my instrument doesn't work right, or because the people that I played with on the bandstand, they don't get me. Like, have you ever heard that, where like musicians kind of project, or maybe you've done that? I've done that before. I mean,
I think that's the classic, and it's the classic victim mentality. And I think it plays out in a different way, because most time when we look at the victim mentality, we look at it in terms of like a friendship, either platonic relationship or romantic relationship, lack of ownership. But I think it also, to your point, when it comes to your teachers or whatever, I think when we learn, I think it can be a lifelong lesson. When we learn to be as self-aware and as sober about ourselves, we put ourselves in a better position. I realized I was a horrible student in college. I was Captain Know-It-All. And to the point where I literally called one of my former professors, a saxophone player in Columbus, a guy named Pete Mills. And I called him and I apologized. I said, man, I just want to let you know, about I don't know, 3-5 years ago we were taking lessons. I just want to apologize for being a horrible student. I could have learned so much more from you, and I could have been a better musician now had I not been so headstrong, you know. But I think there's a level of self-awareness and humility that we have to have in order to, you know, have those realizations. Because otherwise, we all think we're superheroes to ourselves. You know, everyone uses, I'm such a good person. How could X, Y, Z happen to me? I'm a good person. Okay, I hear what you may be saying, but at the same time, I think people that hold on to that "I'm a great person" thing, there may be the most likely is a lack of self-awareness, because we all have flaws. None of us are perfect, and I think that's just an important step in your process. I think the other part of it is not, once you realize you're not perfect, not like getting down on yourself and not getting like, oh, woe is me, I'm horrible. No, you're just not perfect like everyone else walking who's not perfect. You know, we're all on our journeys.
Yeah. I, you know, to me, I think about being growing as a musician. I think about it as having a framework, and that framework is, what is your vision? Like, why do you play music, and what is it that looks like for you in your life,
Yeah.
right? The vision. And then I see that set some goals. Like, do you want to learn 3 tunes? And by learn tunes, what I mean is, what role will you play in that tune, in what ensemble? Because it's different to play a tune unaccompanied than it is to play in a trio or a quartet. Like, you know, and so setting a really specific goal of, I'm going to be able to improvise 2 choruses on Autumn Leaves in G minor with a quartet where there's a drummer and a bass and a piano player, you know, and I want to be able to do it at this tempo by when, right? Like these types of goals. And that's just one example of a goal that somebody could set. And then to have an action plan, which is like, okay, in order to do that, I need to be able to practice efficiently and effectively just for this goal, rather than trying to do everything under the sun, which I realize you almost do everything under the sun. But anyway, because you literally practice 13 instruments and composition and mixing and arranging and stuff. And just to put it out there again to people, like, check out HamiltonHardin.com. Check his links. I'll put links down here in the YouTube. But so that's kind of it's basically vision, goal, action plan. And then after that, you could talk about a lot of the mindset things. But I thought it would be interesting for us to kind of maybe have some multiple conversations and talk about it. And and I'll talk just briefly about the vision side. So for me, when I think about what is my vision as a musician, or my vision as an entrepreneur, or my vision as a father, or my vision, because it all goes hand in hand, like your vision as walking on the earth as a human, or your spiritual walk, whatever it might be, right? I feel like there's the same process here. If we're trying to grow, if we're trying to become more consistent, more happy with who we are, it's the same process. And so looking at where the musical side dovetails with the personal or spiritual, whatever you might want to call it, side. And so for me, the way I look at the vision is that I think that a vision should be half and half, receiving and contributing. In other words, I feel like a lot of people, like when I was younger, and you may or may not relate to this, when I was younger, when I was like probably 20 years old, I just wanted to receive praise. Just being honest. Like, I wanted to go play my violin. I didn't want to have to think about anything. I just wanted people to accompany me and just like, throw me the ball. Let me just jump for it. Like, watch me go and clap for me. Like, that's what I want. I just wanted to receive praise.
Yeah.
And receive attention, right? And the older I get, the more I've gotten more in touch with the contribution side. Like, I want to make a difference for people. But I think other people flip it around, and that they won't even acknowledge that they want to receive anything, and then they go all for, I'm just doing this to give. I'm just doing this to give. And I think when people have that off, when they're not really aligned or being honest with themselves, I think that a lot of times there's a disconnect and or a dissonance, and it manifests in people's growth. So like you were saying about self-awareness, I think if people aren't being honest with themselves, then they're more prone to be delusions of grandeur, narcissism, or this kind of, oh, I suck, I sound horrible, nothing I play, right? And as you were
Yeah.
alluding to earlier, like that's not healthy. Like neither of those are good. Like it's not
Yep.
useful for anybody, for you or for
Yep.
anybody. I'm curious if you agree with that kind of outlook on vision, because I know that there's specific reasons why you play music. One
Hmm.
question I have is it 100% selfless, or do you see that there is virtue in having some selfish, quote unquote, purpose of playing
Yeah.
music?
I see things a little different, but the different way that I see it, I don't think it necessarily um, goes against what you're saying. I think vision and all of that is. I'm sorry. What were the things you said? Vision,
Goal,
um, goals,
action plan,
action plan. I
which is
think
basically a
all that.
practice, which is a practice plan.
Yeah.
What you got it. Yeah.
I think all that is fueled by inspiration. So that's where my vantage point comes from. Like for me, the older I've gotten, the more I'm trying to get back to, man, what about music made me like, man, I want to do that? Who did I see playing when I was a kid that made me go, man, I want to play drums like that? Or man, I can't wait to get on next. I'm trying, I was, I just, I'm trying to get more and more into that feeling because like I said earlier, when music becomes work, sometimes it can become work. And for me, the joy, I'm trying to chase that again to keep that feeling because I know for me, if I start playing music joylessly, I'm going to be, it's going to sound like uninspired music. And so it goes back to inspiration. In the examples you used, for some people, their inspiration may be in initially the applause and the attaboys and man, I've never heard anybody play like that before, and that's a little inspiration. But I think after a while, when you get that all the time, you realize, man, that's not sustainable. And then so I think the point that also you made, for you, you said um, the contribution aspect, how your music is contributing to society. I think that maybe become more inspiring depending where you are in your journey. For me, I pull from who I consider to be the greatest source of inspiration, and that's Jesus Christ. And to consider how I can be used as an instrument for something cosmically so much greater than me, so much greater than my lifetime. And in the story of humanity from Adam and Eve to the end of time, to be able to have a part of that and for him to entrust me, say, one of your roles is going to be in music and how you can serve in that. That's the source of inspiration that I draw from. Sometimes I forget that. Sometimes it becomes more about a job. And sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes in certain circles, I want the attaboys from other musicians and I want to be accepted in my peer group. And I lose sight of my greater inspiration. And then I find myself getting burned out. And I'm like, man, I don't even want to go through periods where I don't want to listen to music. I'll drive in the car silent. I'll listen to talk radio, podcast. But the more I connect back to like my greatest source of inspiration, that's when I get back in line with playing inspired music, writing inspired music that sounds like it has some caffeine in it and not just, blah. So I think inspiration is the thing.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I also heard in that like joy is
Yeah.
something that people can receive. And I guess I was kind of fishing for, in the way that you think about living life as a Christian, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's, if it's all, if the idea is to only contribute 100%, or if there's something, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, in it for you, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like the joy is in it for you if and when you do connect to that inspiration, if and when you are serving out your purpose. And
Yeah.
so there is a balance because I'm guessing that like your body needs to be sustained, your mind needs to be uh, uh, stimulated, right? Like
Yeah.
you need to be nourished, your body and mind and your heart all needs to be nourished for you to even carry out this purpose of contribution. Is that true, or do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, well, a joy for as a Christian, a joyless lifestyle is it's almost like an oxymoron because your everything you do is now out of obligation. When you look at like a love story or like a romantic relationship, um, generally, I'll say as the man, not to people get weird with gender roles, whatever. But for me, subjectively, as a man, um, I feel it's important for me to initiate the type of relationship that I'm wanting. As a Christian, when we look at what Jesus did, he did the ultimate initiation of this is where my love, I lay down my life for you. And then as a Christian, what I now do, over 2,000 years later, I'm like, how do I respond to that? And that's where joy comes from. And I try to even teach my boys, when it comes to reading scripture or praying, if it's like, oh, I haven't done it today yet, let me get this over with. Like, yeah, think about how the other person feels. Like if my son came, hey dad, and I said, oh, I gotta hug you, I guess. Here, how's that feel? Hope you like it. It's like I'm not really in a relationship with him. But when he genuinely feels like, man, my dad really loves me. When he hugged me today, even though they won't, they'll never verbalize it like this. But when my dad hugged me today, I know he loved me. There's a type of relationship to where if I say, "Hey, buddy, go clean your room," um, because he wants to please me, he'll be like, "Okay." So for me as a Christian, because I want to please Jesus, and bring pleasure to that part of the relationship, then I write music that he inspires me and I want to give it back to him. And that's sort of, I think, the necessity of joy at least in a Christian lifestyle. And as a Christian musician, that joy is the inspiration or the fuel tank that fuels at least my music.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, um, this is kind of my invitation to you, and kind of why I thought it would be fun to roll this around with you, and for the people on my channel here. you know, um, I feel like for every musical challenge, again, every musical frustration, everything that any musician might feel that they're being held back by, and that could be, what do I practice? Why am I not getting this thing? Why am I struggling with theory or reading or hearing something, or like, or even like the interpersonal logistics of a gig, like how to respond to a certain type of band leader or certain type of situation where all the other musicians play so well and you feel intimidated. Like all of these situations can cause fear for people.
Yeah.
It can cause people to shut down. I've felt fear. I've felt shut down around these situations, and I've wrestled with them. And so I feel like, in addition to giving people the information about, like, well, this is just how you do it, or this is what you charge, or like, or this is how you practice this. I feel like there's like a more, for me, the way I would say it is more like a psychological lesson. There's like a lesson in self-awareness, which we
Hmm.
both agree upon. Self-awareness is a thing, right? And it's
Yeah.
like I had a student yesterday who, she said she hadn't played for like 20 years, and she was a classical violinist when she grew up. But now she wants to play with other friends of hers who play like punk rock and like other kinds of situations on the street. And she doesn't really know how to converse with those musicians because it's a
Hmm.
different world, right? And she doesn't have those skills. But she was really frustrated, and I was like, and I said, like, she's an athlete, right? And I could tell. I was like, you look like you're an athlete. Like, I'm not being weird, but you look like you're an athlete, And she was like, yeah, I'm an athlete. I was like, I could really tell, right? I was like, well, like when I was 25 years old, I was an athlete, and then I wasn't for 20 years, and so then I found myself 50 pounds overweight, and I couldn't run a mile. But
Yeah.
I had to have an honest conversation with myself and be like, okay, so I guess I'm going to just walk like 10 steps today and 11 steps tomorrow. And it's like the the, the problem that I had was more about priorities, self-awareness, being honest with myself. And I think it would be fun for us to have conversations about these unique situations, unique struggles, and to look at it from the different lenses that we may have. And sometimes we come together on them.
Yo, the performance anxiety thing has to be a whole show by itself. We could talk for, that needs to be a whole segment.
Oh, give me a teaser on that. So tell me about that.
Well, I to this day struggle with performance anxiety, and one thing particularly I remember. So let me go back in certain instances, like for example, my very first guitar gig, live guitar. John Schofield was in the audience, and so this is my first time playing guitar in a public setting. I record guitar a lot in my studio, but I'm by myself. So I was already a little nervous.
That's like your 11th instrument, though, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's one of the last ones.
Yeah.
So and I was I was probably 25 or so, and they said, "Hey, John Schofield's here." I was in Indianapolis, playing at the Jazz Kitchen in Indianapolis, and I froze up so bad I dropped my pick like twice because my hands were shaking like this when I was playing, and I realized for me that sometimes if I know who's in the audience or if I think there's somebody in the audience that can change my life, oh, such and such, he's a big producer and he's looking for somebody like you. Oh, you wait till he hears you. It's like, oh crap. And I get a little performance anxiety. What helped me is ignoring the audience and focusing on my bandmates and focusing on the conversation on stage. I remember the last gig I did with you, I was playing drums, and I haven't played with drums, I don't think ever with you.
That was like, that was the first time.
Yeah.
And we've done like hundreds of gigs together, but you never played drums with me. Yeah.
Right. But to that point, as soon as, because you and I were there first before the other band members came, and the level of comfort that I felt with you, even though I played drums, like I immediately was loose. When the other guys came, and the other guys, one of them is like a big mentor of mine. And so, but I started wondering, oh man, I'm just wondering what they're thinking. So I immediately, after you and I were doing the duo thing, warming up, it was cool. As soon as they came to practice, I tightened up again. I felt rigid. I didn't feel loose. And it took me like a warm up period to when I felt they were comfortable with me, then I relaxed and got comfortable on the drums. But I feel that all the time. I just did a tour with Kirk Whalum for his holiday Christmas tour. We did about 5 weekends, touring different cities. In the rehearsal, I was playing so timid because I'm like, I don't know. But once I got comfortable with those individuals, by that second gig, I warmed up to them and I felt like I was playing with the aggression that I like to play with. And for me, I've learned that with the whole stage fright thing, I'm learning I need to get comfortable with people. So I try to, if I can, get there early, joke around with cats, and I feel comfortable. I work through that stage fright of those jitters a lot better. But if I don't get that time, it's a lot of deep breaths and a lot of just like mentally focusing on, okay, Hamilton, relax, just enjoy the moment, be thankful for this moment with them. Don't worry about who's in the crowd. Don't worry about nailing the music. Just worry about giving your all. If this is the last performance you'll ever play, who knows what I could get in a car accident tonight, who knows, but whatever, like give it your all. And so I try to think like that. But that whole, as you see with the tangent I just went on, that whole performance anxiety thing, it's a real thing. I took a performance anxiety class in college dealing with, it was like my saxophone professor and a psychologist, and they taught the class together. And I noticed that when I played prepared pieces that everyone else knew, like a classical etude, I froze up and my hand was shaking while I was playing saxophone. If it was improvisation and I could play freely, I was like, ah. And then, because there's no expectations. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time.
I like that, and but it's interesting because the things that you shared about performance anxiety, like I feel like I can really relate to those, whether or not I was a Christian or not. And I would also
Hmm.
be interested for people who are Christian musicians or Christians and who deal with anxiety of any time
Yeah.
type, because I would think that anxiety is just anxiety. Like performance anxiety isn't just musical. It's like if you're going to meet somebody for the first time, if you're
Right.
going to give a speech, right? And I'm just really curious about how well, for example, I would imagine that prayer maybe factors into that for you sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, before every gig, what I've learned to do is number one, I get out. I try to read if it's just 5 minutes, just read some scripture, particularly from the Psalms, which is like a Hebrew poetry book, inspired by God, and I try to read some of that and just it helps me get focused. And then the other thing that I've been doing probably for the last year is realizing, and talk about self-realization, is realizing that by myself I'm going to suck and I am in need of God to open my mind up. I'm in need of him to give me make sure my facility is where it is, you know, especially if I haven't had a Red Bull or coffee. Like I need him to give me focus, or even with coffee, I could still be everywhere, but I need him to focus. And I think my realization of my reliance on him helps me as a Christian, and has helped me over these last, 6 months of gigs since the quarantine opened up, to really like be focused and zoned in. And honestly, since I've been doing that, I haven't had a situation where I had one of those freeze ups
It
personally.
feels, it feels to me like also part of this, and then I mean, I think we can probably wrap this, but I mean, I feel like part of it is again going back to self awareness and a certain level of humility,
Mm.
knowing that like there's always a chance that we can stumble on the stage. There's always this chance that we might not feel the inspiration that we need to make real magic happen, to
Yeah.
connect, to really connect spiritually with the audience through music,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's a humility in that I sense from you always as a musician, and in all the years that we've played together, always feeling when I play with you that you're always like connecting with me, like how can I support, that I'm feeling that supportive energy from you on the bandstand, like a listening energy, like an asking, like like,
Yeah.
and not as opposed to like I'm here to show what I'm made of and I'm going to prove to everybody that I'm so great, right? Which I
Yeah.
think is a lot of what a lot of students or players of all levels struggle with, is that
Yeah.
humility and honesty and kind of quiet confidence. I don't know. Do you agree or not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, generically speaking, it is with the younger musicians, and generally older musicians. I feel like you can look back in retrospect because you've been through that phase. Like you were talking about, I know I can tell you, man, when I was 19, can't tell me nothing. Greatest thing to touch an instrument. But, but then, I mean, you start to play with people, and then, you get humbled, or situation with somebody's your age or younger, and they're doing more. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not the only one. And you have enough situations, you just grow out of that. And by the time, hopefully by the time are well established in your career, there is a level of humility that takes place. But I think it is a little connected to, age. Generally speaking, you know, when we're kids, teenagers, maybe
Okay,
post
okay,
teen. Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry. No disrespect, but
No, go ahead.
I gotta speak up there because don't you know musicians who are in their 40s and their 50s and
Oh yeah, no, that's why I said generally.
oh okay, all
Oh,
right.
because there's, yeah. Because I also know some really humble young musicians.
Right. Okay.
But generally speaking, that's the case. Now we both know we're not obviously not going to be naive enough to name names online, but we just know people that they think they the stuff, they know they the stuff, and maybe they just haven't been shut down enough, or their self-awareness is whatever it is. There's tons of reasons why people are arrogant. I think there is still like a hunger or insecurity for applause, or after the gig, they'll be the first one that says, oh man, I did so horrible. And they're really they're saying that. So you say, oh no, you weren't, you were great. And they say, well, really? Okay. It's like a false, it's like a false humility because you're really just searching for applause. Yeah. And I can say that because I've done that before. I've been that dude.
Sure.
Thankfully, when I was younger in life, as opposed to now, but now I'm able to discern that. And someone says, oh man, I was really bad tonight. I'll just say, man, practice for next time. Like, I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to give you that, attaboy if you're searching for that, because you probably need to learn some lessons on some self-awareness. You're not the greatest person to touch an instrument.
and well, I think these are some of the big, we're kind of touching on briefly, but I think these are some of the common struggles that I see with people is getting stuck, fear, lack of awareness, insecurity that manifests in lots of ways, whether it's arrogance, whether it's like punishing, behavior, people that are just, will never come out. They'll never, there's people that just don't want to play. They'll never play. Right. Always anxious. And these are the kinds of things that I want to help people with on this channel. If you're watching right now, I want you to leave a comment and just tell us, what are your struggles? What are you looking to learn about? And Hamilton, I'm just putting it out there, man. I think it could be really cool for you to help people that are maybe, especially perhaps Christians, or anybody that resonates with the music that you do. Really, sure. anybody with your perspective on these kinds of questions. And I would, so anybody's watching, if you want to share questions for Hamilton, put it in the comments down here. Reach out to him at his website, Hardin.com, HamiltonHardin.com. Look for him on YouTube. Look for the podcast we did. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I feel like you and I got a lot of these to do. So tonight, no. But yes, we got a lot to talk about.
Awesome. All right.